Sure. Hi, I'm Katie. I graduated from Northwestern in 2017. I was actually a transfer student, so I didn't start at Northwestern, but I finished there, the best place in the world. I majored in RTVF, which is radio, television, and film. My focus was screenwriting, so I completed the creative writing for the media module, and I also minored in art history. And I almost minored in Asian American studies, but I didn't have enough time, but maybe one day. Yeah. And now I live in Los Angeles. I'm an actor, a writer, and a producer. I work as much as I can, both on independent projects and on projects other people are making. And I just signed with a new management company. So that was like my big 2020 decision. So.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Congrats on that big decision. And we'll move to Macray next and a little bit about your major and your work.
Yeah, sure thing. So I am also class of 2017, but I graduated after the fall quarter in 2016. I studied economics and political science. Loved both of them, loved my experience at Northwestern. And I started at Goldman Sachs in April of 2017. I'm a financial analyst in the private wealth division. So what that means is I help ultra high net worth investors manage their money. So it's been a pretty cool experience. I'm in Chicago, usually living in Lakeview. Right now I'm in the suburbs with my parents for a little bit, given the quarantine situation. But happy to talk about Chicago, what it's like in my industry, and everything regarding that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Macray. And Maria, we'll finish with you and your major and work.
Hi, my name is Maria. I'm also class of 2017. While I was at Northwestern, I majored in history and minored in both Spanish and Latino studies. And I currently am the office manager at St. Matthew Catholic School in Phoenix, Arizona. And how I sort of got there was right after graduation, I joined a program called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is a 1 year long year of service after college graduation. And so with that, I joined that program, moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and, fell in love with the area, with my job, and I managed to get hired on and weasel my way into staying ever since. So I've been here for 3 years now, since right after graduating at Northwestern.
Awesome. That's great, Maria. And let's start with you for our next question around what were some of the impactful classes or experiences for you in school that led you to consider your chosen field? And also, Maria, I know you have plans to change it up a little bit this fall, so we'd love to hear a little bit about what impacted that decision as well.
Absolutely. So while at Northwestern, definitely some of the most impactful classes I took were in Latino studies, and some of the most practical classes I took were in Spanish. So in my current job, the school I work at is a dual language elementary school, meaning our students are educated in a 50-50 English-Spanish model from grades kindergarten through 8th grade, with them sort of transitioning into a more English-dominant model in the middle school years to get them ready for high school. But it means on a daily basis, my ability to speak Spanish fluently, communicate with students, parents, faculty, you name it, is a huge practical asset to what I do. It's also something that I love doing, and was something that I was looking for in a career option after graduating. So I knew taking those classes in the Spanish department were really going to impact my options as a person looking for employment after the fact, if I wanted to be in a job that had sort of Spanish language fluency or proficiency requirements. And then on a more personal level, I would say studying Latino studies and history both together gave me a lot of insight into issues of social justice and inequality going on in the world today. I've always been interested in education, but those classes definitely gave me more of a framework for understanding the roots of a lot of issues that are present today in education systems, in classrooms, in sort of the social situations that a lot of my students and families find themselves in. And as mentioned, I'm actually doing a kind of big transition this fall. At the end of this summer, I'll be moving back to Massachusetts, where I'm originally from, and I'm going to be starting my graduate studies at Boston College in their Master's Social Work program. So definitely my 3 years here out in Phoenix, not to mention my 4 years at Northwestern, kind of set me on this path of looking for ways to stay involved with community work, specifically through schools. And now I'm kind of changing directions a little bit, but hopefully staying in the same field, more or less, of education and kind of building on my prior experiences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that, Maria, that you had some experiences at Northwestern that led you down that. And then once you're in it, you're like, oh, how do I, do something slightly different, but in the same field? So I think that's great. Thanks for sharing. And Macray, how about you with those impactful classes or experiences?
Yeah, I would say the experience really speaks to me because I did the Chicago Field Studies program, and that's what initially led me to Goldman Sachs. And my plan going into Northwestern was actually to go to law school. So that was kind of the origination behind the political science aspect of the degree. And I changed my plan completely after I did my after I did the Field Studies program. So it's okay that plans change. I ended up really loving that experience, and it ended up leading to a summer job, and then I came back full time. So in terms of classes, I would say probably the most helpful was the economic history of the United States post 1865. We cover the Great Depression. We cover booms and busts. I think that was really helpful in my job and speaking to clients now on contextualizing what's going on. But I would say without the Field Studies program, I probably would not have ended up in finance. I probably would have gone to law school, and I'm happy I did it because I really enjoy what I'm doing now.
Absolutely, that's great. The pivot happened a little earlier, and you kind of just went with it, and that's great. So thanks, Macray. And Katie, how about you and impactful classes at Northwestern?
Yeah, I think I came to NU into the classes with like a little bit of a different perspective. Not only was I transferring, but also as an actor, I started working when I was 12. So career-wise, I felt secure in a certain sense, as much security as you can feel in an artistic field. But I also knew there were so many elements of the industry I wanted to gain more knowledge and experience with, especially with writing and producing. And one of the reasons that I transferred was to go to a school that had a program that was more application-based, so actually using the skills and doing something instead of just learning the history and the theory, which is equally important when you talk about film, but I wanted to know how to make movies too. And so some of those classes that were so impactful were actually those intro classes that I took at the beginning. RTVF 190, I think it was, which is just your basic intro to film production. You make a short film, you write a short script, you learn about all these elements of film. And then also intro to screenwriting, just learning the basics, which I know sounds kind of silly, but it was so foundational for me to go to these programs where I was actually learning the skills instead of sitting watching someone else's work. I got to make my own, so that was really impactful. And then I think for me, just those extracurriculars were incredible. Getting involved in the Northwestern community and feeling that sense of pride and togetherness was huge for me. I didn't have that at my first school. And I did a lot of producing for theater. So I think that ultimately was one of the biggest experiences that influenced me moving forward, learning how to work with other people, solve problems creatively, manage a budget. I'm sure I could have used Macray's help with that, but it was really, really meaningful. Yeah.
That's great, Katie. Thanks for sharing. And we'll start with you on this next question around first jobs and whether it was exactly what you were looking for. And I know every industry is a little bit different, so I'm curious, in the arts and these different projects, how that worked out for you. And then also with the lens that we have a lot of students who might be graduating into uncertain times. And, can you talk through, like, if this wasn't your plan A, how did you strategize with your career to get back on the track you wanted to be on, and how our students might be able to use some of those same decision-making skills?
It's a really good question. I think my first job was when I was like 14, but and it was great. My first job out of school, I actually had a big sort of identity crisis right after Northwestern. I had loved my time at NU, and I felt very rattled by leaving this place where I felt so safe and loved and happy. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I should try a job away from the industry. I actually moved to New York City and I worked for Carnegie Hall for, I think, about half a year, doing fundraising and producing events, but obviously not like with the intent of making a play or making a film. But that in and of itself was amazing experience, because a lot of the time when you're making your own short film or your own TV series, you have to self-fund and independently produce. So learning how to fundraise and ask people for money or create events where, you know, you are raising money for a cause, that was actually all really impactful for my main career too. So I'm glad that I thought a little bit more outside of the box to try and get some different life experiences without invalidating them because they weren't directly related to what I wanted to do. Just being open-minded was huge. Another thing after that process that I dealt with a lot was this like concept of uncertainty, you know, because the creative field, and especially when you're an actor, a writer, a producer, you are always self-employed, and there's so much uncertainty and instability when it comes to not only finances but just frequency of work. So mentally I had to become really comfortable with uncertainty and lack of control, which for me, being a perfectionist, was very difficult. But one of the best lessons I ever learned, and I'm really grateful that like I'm probably 90% okay with uncertainty, because now in this time, you know, there is so much uncertainty, especially when it comes to when am I going to be acting again? When am I going to be writing again? So being comfortable with that was huge, and just understanding that I can't predict everything. That was more of like the mental process. Moving to LA was a huge decision for me. I personally am a bigger advocate for LA than New York City when it comes to filmmaking and writing and acting. I think the culture here, the community here is a lot better. It's more supportive, and there are more opportunities for not only non-union self-funded work, but for those union jobs that you would maybe hire, like more highly considered for out here. And then my first job out in LA was actually writing on a TV show. And that was a really great experience, really exciting, and just understanding how a writer's room works. So I think my biggest thing for anyone who's in the creative field is being open-minded to lots of different experiences that don't seem directly related to what you want to do. Because as an artist, you're a collector. You go through life collecting experiences, collecting knowledge, collecting information to use later on, but not in a malicious way, obviously, just in a way where you are open and okay with the uncertainty and possibly the murkiness of the purpose of what you are doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Katie. I think that's great, you know, for the arts field, but also, you know, for students entering an uncertain time, it is great to keep that open mind and think through how, you know, some of those experiences will help you down the road, whether it's what you want to be doing now or not. So I love that. Thanks for sharing.
I think my biggest thing is like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, we all want to win an Oscar when we're 22. I'm not 22 anymore. I haven't won an Oscar. You know, I think maybe it seems superfluous to work at a coffee shop when you really want to be an actor, but something in that menial job that you're doing just to pay rent will come back and be important later in your life because of some other circumstance that you're in. So there's no purposelessness. Everything is informative when you're an actor.
Yep, I love that. That's great. Thanks, Katie. And Macray, we'll jump to you with this question around first jobs and strategizing your next steps. And I know you're also pursuing an MBA, so curious how we can tie that into your next steps.
Yeah, sure thing. So I would say first job, I kind of knew what I was getting into. Obviously, I had done 2 internships there, but it's, you know, going back with the theme that I was talking about earlier, my interest kind of changed. You know, I had been working with private clients, and I have been working with private clients the past 3 years. And I was working with them on some of their businesses and getting to see like what they actually do in their day jobs. And I got more interested in the corporate finance aspect as opposed to the investing aspect. So I decided to go back to school, and I'm going to school at night right now to get my MBA and maybe make a pivot within Goldman to do something that's more corporate finance related. I would say kind of how I approach this, and it kind of goes with what Katie said with the collecting experiences, is viewing jobs and viewing these things as, look to where you want to be and what the goal job is, or, like Katie said, maybe it is to win an Oscar, maybe it's to run a division of a company or whatnot, and what skills do you need to get there, and what role can you collect some of those skills? So for me, what am I collecting right now? I'm working with markets, I'm working with clients directly, I'm presenting, I'm preparing materials. So trying to figure out what skills that you feel like you need to build for your job is important when you're trying to decide on that first one. And then, doing a reflection, because it's not permanent, like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So doing a reflection after a year, after 2 years, and saying, okay, what do I really like about this? And what do I feel like I need to get a little bit more of? And, trying to do that evaluation. So for me, it was, I really like working with clients. I love, working in financial markets. I'm not going to do the law school, so I wasted a lot of time on the LSAT. But what do I need more of? I want to, get a little bit deeper into the quantitative analysis. Okay, what skills do I need? I need a little bit more of the, financial statement analysis skills. So I'm backfilling that with school, and then coming up with a plan. I would say the other thing is, I still view, even though we're out of school, as extracurriculars as a great way to supplement your first job, especially in like an uncertain environment. So for me, I wanted to do some more project related work, because a lot of my work now it's long-term relationships. Private wealth's a very sticky business where you work with people for a very long time. Most of our clients that I work with have been, with my advisors for 10 or 15 years, but I wanted to work more on a project. So I joined a couple boards. So I'm helping the Brookfield Zoo, for example, and I'm trying to host a young alumni fundraiser next year, and trying to think through that and work with a team of other partners. So I think you can supplement some of those skills that you want to build towards for your future goal job in extracurriculars as well. And I would encourage others to look for those things as well, whether it's volunteering or, kind of the classic side hustle, as some people may call it. There are a lot of ways to supplement what you're doing. But I think just one thing that's really important is to do the continual self-reflection, because we all have agency, and you can change and you can adapt based on the environment.
Yeah, I think that's great, Macray. And the self-reflection, relatively early on in your career, like you mentioned, 1.5 years, 2 years in, where am I at? Where do I want to be? Supplementing with some of these other activities, I think really great advice to kind of figure out what your, career path will look like, and making it your own.
Yeah, for sure. And I would just say, don't worry if you feel like you hit a wall after 4 months or 6 months. It's a little bit different. I mean, if you've done an internship before and you have that end date, so you're like, okay, I have 10 weeks of work and then I go back to school. In work, it's just perpetual. So after you get through those 10 weeks, then it's like, okay, this is like forever now. And it's okay to like, have that feeling and, feel like it's never ending. I would just say that make sure that you also have your outlets. So for me, I like to run, I like to bike, I like to golf. So make sure you're leaning on your outlets and your friends, because, it is very much a marathon, and, there'll be ups and downs in a career just like there are in school. And, self-reflection will help you realize what's causing the ups and downs, but, make sure you have balance in your life too.
Absolutely, Macray. And, some of that advice, even now more so than ever with our students, of getting out for run, having your outlets, so important. So thanks for sharing. And Maria, I know you mentioned a little bit about your first job. Maybe we can talk through how you found that job, and again, like plan A, plan B, kind of how you strategized from there.
Absolutely. So I was somebody who, I hope there's more of you out there, but when I got to Northwestern, September of my senior year, I pretty much showed up on campus with no clue whatsoever what I was doing after graduation, meaning I had built up a lot of wonderful experiences, interests, extracurriculars while I was at Northwestern, things that I absolutely adored doing. But I didn't know at the time how I was going to translate that into a career, or even into a temporary job for the first month after graduation. So I spent the majority of my senior year Googling, researching, talking to as many people as possible, because I was trying to just get a sense of how do I connect these interests that I've developed over my 4 years here at Northwestern with an actual tangible career path. And for me, that didn't necessarily mean that I was going into postgraduate life with a plan A. I just sort of had this idea of, okay, I want to be in education. And exactly what that looks like, I'm not quite sure. And I was willing to be flexible with sort of my expectations as long as I was in the industry or environment where I knew I was going to be learning a lot. So for me, that was kind of the priority. So what I ended up doing was I looked at quite a few programs that basically all kind of fall into the category of postgraduate year of service programs. I had already done a year of AmeriCorps service at Northwestern through the Jumpstart program, which is housed in the Center for Civic Engagement, and I had a wonderful experience. So I sort of used that as a jumping off point for my search. I said, okay, I knew I enjoyed doing a year of service while in school with AmeriCorps. I'm going to look and see what options they have for me to do something full-time after graduation. And through looking at all these different year of service programs, I looked at AmeriCorps, I looked into Teach for America, I looked into the one I ended up eventually doing, the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is a Catholic-based program. I pretty much just went through the application processes. I was trying to find not just the program that was going to be a good fit for me, but also the placement. So with a lot of postgraduate service programs, you go through a regular job application process. You submit a resume to potential placements or employers for that year of service. They give you a call, interview you, you get back to them and say whether or not you're interested. So when I was going through that process, the interviewing process with my Jesuit Volunteer Corps application, I had an interview with my current employer, St. Matthew's School. I interviewed with the principal and with a couple of staff members at the time, and it just blew me away, sort of how they presented not just what the position was going to be, what I would be doing on a day-to-day basis, which I'll get into, but just how they discussed the culture of the school, which to me was something that was really important, thinking a lot about education as kind of more holistic than just academics, especially when you're working with younger children. And so the way they were describing sort of their mentality around education and the way they prioritized not just the academic, but emotional and social well-being of their students really spoke to me. And I pretty much jumped as soon as they offered me the job, got on a plane and moved to Phoenix, Arizona for a year. And so that first year, the position I took was actually as a full-time school-wide substitute teacher. So that meant I was substitute teaching anywhere from kindergarten through 8th grade, all within this one school. So I was just sort of a permanent member of the staff, and I bounced around to any different classroom as, you know, was needed based on the teacher schedules. You know, if somebody needed me to cover their lunch duty, or if somebody needed me to take their math class in the afternoon while they had a dentist appointment, or if, you know, they were going to be out for a week. It was a huge lesson in being flexible. And I would say for me, that was really what I needed, because I wanted to learn a lot in a short amount of time. And again, I didn't sort of have any set expectations of, I want to be, you know, a head classroom teacher 12 months out from graduation or something like that. I was willing to sort of take whatever positions were available to me, as long as sort of the environment or the setting felt like one where I could really learn a lot. And that proved to be the case for me sort of right from the start. So I would say one of my biggest pieces of advice for making that decision for your first job is sort of, as Katie and Macray have both mentioned, keeping that open mind and thinking of everything as a learning experience, because for me, that's really what that first position was. And so after that, I obviously looking for ways to stay on at that school. I really fell in love with the community, and so I wound up as the office manager, which again, still not teaching, still not necessarily what people think of when they think of traditional education paths. But for me, it was the opportunity to keep learning, to keep engaging with the community, and to keep on sort of working within this field that I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do with, but I certainly had sort of just this feeling or this idea that I wanted to stay there, and I was going to really make whatever decisions were both practical and allowed me that opportunity to stay where I knew I was learning a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Maria, and I know you mentioned too a little bit about some of the things that you learned in your Spanish background and how that's played out in your work. And I'm curious, what else has surprised you about what you learned or did in school that helps you in your work today? And also, you know, with the twist of how do you see your arts and science background playing out in your career?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people definitely out here in education surprised for people entering the education field without a background in education, which I have none of, but I've always found it so surprisingly, in a good way, helpful to have my background in history and in a liberal arts or arts and science education in general, just because I really think the critical thinking skills and the ability to sort of digest and analyze and really utilize a lot of information coming at you from a lot of different directions is an incredible skill no matter what industry you're in. So for me, I majored in history. It's a lot of reading, it's a lot of writing, and it really, really prepared. I didn't expect to juggle a lot of different tasks falling onto my plate to be able to sort of keep, again, significant amounts of very different information and sort of build on those critical thinking skills that I practice in an academic setting and apply them really to a job or a professional setting. I was surprised that they transferred over as easy as they did, and it really, I think, has strengthened my ability to be an effective person, whether that was as a substitute teacher, or whether it's now as an office manager. Those skills of, again, critical thinking, but generally just being able to, again, intake, analyze, and deal with a lot of information is unmatched, really, no matter what field you're going into. You don't have to become a historian for that to be a valuable set of skills in your professional life.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Maria. And Macray, same question to you. What surprised you that you use in your work today, and what about the arts and science background do you see playing out in your work?
You know, it's funny because obviously economics, I knew that would translate, you know, working in finance, but what ends up, you know, being a major factor is, you know, I work in a people business. You know, I'm constantly talking to clients, talking to, you know, colleagues. I'd say the two biggest things are whenever you have a group project, I mean, the work environment is so group based at this point, especially with what I do. So a lot of the group projects that I did in school, you know, learning how to work with a team, work with different personalities, that directly translates. And really all of the distribution requirements, you know, the fact that I took Shakespeare and I took history classes and I took, you know, science classes, it helps you become a more well-rounded person. And so now I can have these fluent conversations with people in different careers, and it really helps you connect better, especially with my role, which has a sales people component to it. So I would say, you know, working with teams, you know, given the arts and science background and just how Northwestern does classes, there's a lot of, you know, teamwork and collaboration that's emphasized. And just, you know, obviously, you know, the critical thinking, you know, that you need to be able to do all these different, you know, classes goes unsaid. But really the distribution requirements, the fact that you're taking classes in areas that are maybe outside your comfort zone, it helps you broaden your perspective on things and have conversations with people that are doing different careers. So it's been really helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Macray. And Katie, same question to you. What has surprised you that you use? How do you see that arts and science background playing out?
Yeah, I don't know if anything necessarily surprised me, just because I hoped I would be using all of it. And I'm glad that, you know, for the most part, I absolutely do. I mean, especially during this time when, you know, auditions are slower, I'm writing every day, so I'm using all that knowledge that I learned from my various writing classes. One of the things that I think has been really helpful is that the screenwriting classes at Northwestern are structured as if they are writers' rooms. You share pages, you edit each other's work. So kind of touching on what Macray said, learning how to work with others and work on a team and accomplish a task together. That's been something that I've brought over into my professional life. It's been very helpful, especially because when you are on set as an actor or a producer or a writer, there are tons of people doing very important jobs, and it's good to know how to manage yourself in that kind of environment. And I think also I agree, you know, that taking a variety of types of classes, having my art history, taking the Asian American studies classes that I did, that one science class that I didn't do that well in, but you know, like all these things that I remember, they do help you become a well-rounded person. And ultimately that's something that's important in this industry, because like more than half of the creative field, and especially as an actor, creative, exec, whatever, is networking, is having conversations with people. And most of the time you're talking about something that doesn't seem like it has to do with your career necessarily, but showing that you are someone who can speak intelligently about a number of different topics, that has always kind of been helpful for me, because even if I'm auditioning for something, one of the last rounds when you're auditioning is to meet the director and have a conversation, make sure that you are compatible personality wise. So to be able to hold a conversation, but also talk about many different things and show that you are not just this one thing as an actor, has been really helpful. And so I'm grateful to the whole concept of the liberal arts education, because it definitely forced me to be less narrow-minded. I think when I got to college, I was so focused on film, and then I discovered this deep love for art history and museums and anthropology, and I'm grateful that I was able to, you know, develop those interests.
Yeah, and I do a little bit of recruiting for Goldman, and one of the things that's interesting is, you know, we always say the airport test. And like, would you want to sit with this person at the airport or sit with them, you know, on a plane? And I think Northwestern students, just because of the arts and science background, you know, pretty much always pass that airport test, just because they've had all these experiences, that most of them have multiple majors, most of them are involved in extracurriculars. So they have so many different things to talk about that, you know, the time flies by when you're talking to them. So.
Yeah, you're very correct. And I think maintaining that kind of Renaissance approach to life in your professional life now will be really important. So having those couple extracurriculars or volunteer, where, you know, just continuing to pursue multiple interests, so that that part of your brain that can multitask and be well-rounded, it doesn't deteriorate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great, Katie and Macray. Thank you both for sharing. And I love how we have, you know, we're getting bits and pieces of similar advice across these three very different industries. And I'm sure with this next question around networking, it'll be interesting to see how it differs within each of your industries. So my next question is kind of, how has your industry shifted or evolved with the current global pandemic? And what advice do you have for networking in your industry today? You know, I'm sure the networking advice that you gave a couple months ago would be, you know, get out there and meet people. What is some of that advice you have today?
Well, it's a great question. I think that the industry, my industry, and specifically speaking towards like new opportunities, that's really the thing that has taken a hit. It's a little technical, but because of the nature of film production, you are in close quarters with people, and there are times where it just wouldn't be safe to be working right now. So because, you know, you're not sitting at cubicles where you can be 6 feet away. I mean, someone's leaning over you with a microphone while you're like under a box and there's a camera in your face. It's intimate process at the end of the day. It's not very out either. So there's you know, there has been really a complete halt on production, and also on the buying of new content, creation, and new opportunities. That being said, I count myself very lucky, because even though things are really slowing to a pause right now, I'm still having auditions and I'm still having meetings, but it's all digital. Whereas maybe before half of my auditions were in person and half were self-tapes, now they're all self-tapes. Maybe before, when I was in the process of signing with a new management company, I would have met in person. I met everyone on Zoom. It's okay. It's almost a better way to gauge someone's personality, handle this odd situation. And then when it comes to networking, I'm finding that I honestly, not much has changed with the way I work, because especially when it came to like Northwestern alumni, I would just, over the last 3 years, send cold emails to people that I found on the alumni network. I would do a search, based on a keyword, maybe producer in Los Angeles, and then see what came up, and cold email everyone. Research them before, but cold email everyone. And I came out with 2 really amazing mentors who are here in Los Angeles. One of them is the president of production at Amblin, which is Steven Spielberg's company. No, he doesn't buy my scripts, but he gives me advice and he reads them, and I would have never connected with him had I not just thought, what can I lose by emailing this person? Even if he doesn't respond, he will never remember. But now he's a mentor of mine. So, and I think that nowadays, there's sort of an art to emailing someone, because you don't want to take up too much airspace during this troubling time. But people do have more time and maybe are sympathetic of the fact that you are soon to be a graduate coming into this uncertain time. Maybe, I think it could work to your advantage of connecting with people. So going on that alumni network, cold emailing instead of cold calling, it's not good for you by any means.
That's great. Thanks, Katie. And my internet is being a little wonky, so I'm going to take my video down, but just to help with my connectivity. But Macray, would love to move to you, and same question around how your industry has shifted and networking.
I'll go first with the shifted, because it's been a big change. So, banking and, really investment banking, commercial banking as a whole is kind of a relatively stodgy industry. It's hesitant to change its ways. There are a lot of issues that it still has to resolve, especially from, making sure it's a representative population, making sure that there's, opportunity for everyone. So I was really surprised with how well we adapted. So we're remote right now, and it's been a great environment. I'm just really shocked at how well it's worked. It's basically like working in the office, but I'm at home. The only thing is I wish I had my Cisco phone, so I had all my phone lines as opposed to using my cell phone. But it's been a really interesting shift. I would say from a networking perspective, I think, from the business world, things are a little chaotic as you can imagine with, seeing the unemployment numbers. But I think that makes people more receptive to networking, I would say, because people generally, at least, that I've come across, want to help out. People love talking about themselves. So I think, getting people, shooting cold emails is totally fine. Going on LinkedIn and, trying to find people who are in a career that you, aspire to be in, who you may have a connection with, whether it's Northwestern, a specific club at Northwestern, the more personal, the better. And just asking them about how your industry is adapting and, any advice that you have for incoming students, who else should I talk to is always a really good question to ask when you're networking with people. Like, hey, this is really great. Do you have any recommendations on, if you have something specific that, they mentioned, you have someone, someone that I should, reach out to regarding this topic? That way you can continue to build out your network. One thing that I've been doing that's been really helpful is trying to reconnect with some of my old friends at Northwestern who, had fallen out of touch with, whether they moved out and, hadn't talked to them about a year. But I think this is just a really good time just to, reconnect with people because, Katie's right. We do have more time. There's no commuting. Usually I commute, half hour each way every day, plus the commute to school. It frees up a lot of time. So it's great to, have the opportunity to, reach back out to people. And it's I would just say that, make sure you're brief in the emails. Just, it's really hard for someone who's working like a long time to like read a super long email. And it's much easier to explain your story over the phone or over a Zoom call. People are more receptive to Zoom calls now just because it's kind of the way of the world. So be brief, introduce yourself, and don't be afraid of like rejection or following up with an email, because people are like really busy. I know people have a lot of free time, but people get a lot of emails. So like when I wake up for my work email, there's like 50 or 60 emails in there. And sometimes I may not get to one, but it's okay to like bump up the email and be like, hey, just wanted to follow up on this. And, Katie may have sent 100 emails, to all her cold networking, and she found 2 great mentors, and those are with her now. And I'm the same way. I've sent a bunch of emails, reached out to a bunch of people, bought a bunch of people coffee. And, and there's a few people that I would consider like friends, mentors, trusted advisors in my life now. So it's okay if, you don't click with everyone that you're going to reach out to, or if not everyone responds. So don't be afraid if, your first couple times, if the call doesn't go right, or, if you feel like, oh, I feel bad that I wasted this person's time, it's okay. We're all just trying to figure it out. So don't get discouraged. Just keep reaching out to people, and, make sure that you know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Macray. I love those, some of those really tangible tips of keeping it brief, and also circling back to bring something to the top of an inbox. I think those are really valuable tips, because oftentimes, like you said, alumni may have missed the email, and bringing it to the top is not, not nagging or not a bad thing. So I think that's great advice. And Maria, we'll go to you for that, the networking and global pandemic question.
Yeah, I really want to echo what both of my fellow panelists have already mentioned about just going ahead with those emails. I know it can seem intimidating, but I think a lot of people in most industries, if not all of them, but I can only speak really to education, if they are in the industry, especially if they have spent the entirety of their career in that field, they are most likely very committed to whatever it is they're doing, not to mention passionate on a personal level about their profession. And most of the time, they're going to be very enthusiastic to share that with somebody who has that shared interest. So I think making sure that in your email, you're really stating why you are interested in speaking to them, whether it's a connection through Northwestern or whether it's a particular school or subject matter that they're teaching in the cases of education. I think kind of maintaining that connection of identifying yourself with them and sort of trying to, understand how they got to where they are. Most people are going to be very excited to talk about something that they love doing. And so I think that works to many people's advantage if you just go ahead and send that email. But I do think, that's not going to be the case for every single time you try, and that's still okay. It's still worth continuing to try to find those few people who really are going to become those mentors, those friends, or even people who kind of can illustrate for you what a potential career path may look like, or what different options may look like in a given field. So I definitely would also encourage you, send those emails, see if you can set up those phone or Zoom calls. Just keep trying, and don't worry too much about coming off as nagging or bothering someone. In terms of changes in the profession, just like you guys at Northwestern and, in education settings all across the world, most schools are online. For myself personally, here in Arizona, we have a very early start end to the school year, so we are actually on summer vacation. But it was a tough last couple of months of the school year. Education, specifically at the elementary level, is an extremely interpersonal profession, meaning that you gain so much information from your relationship and your person-to-person communications, whether that's one-on-one or in a group classroom setting, or even when students just wander into my office looking for like a snack. You really can't replace that on Zoom. You can try and you can do your best to a certain extent, but what I learned, and what I think a lot of my fellow faculty members learned, is that being creative and being flexible is what will get you through difficult times or transitions in your profession. For us, that meant switching our classes to online settings. Even though I work in the office, I'm lucky to work at a school that allows me to teach some electives. And so, my elective classes moved online, and just figuring out different ways that we can keep in touch with students, keep them engaged, and also incorporating a lot of their own feedback, because education is very much a two-way street. I learn, my colleagues learn just as much from our students as they do from us. And so if we're all expected to learn how to put classes online and, you know, me again talking to parents from my bedroom instead of my office or any range of activities, it's been so helpful to incorporate their feedback into, you know, our next steps. For example, specific to what I'm doing as the office manager, I deal with a lot of our parent and family communications. And just like anyone else, a lot of our parents were getting sick of really long emails from me detailing everything going on and all the changes and what was going on. And that's totally understandable. I was getting tired of writing them. And so based off of feedback from families and also trying to figure out, trying to troubleshoot really the issues that we were encountering, we switched all of our weekly emails, if you will, into Facebook Live Q&A sessions. So our families could submit any questions that they did have either ahead of time or in the little comment section on Facebook on the side. And that was just one way that we had to make a change, but it actually taught us so much about alternative ways to communicate, in this case with families. I know a lot of my colleagues, though, have found really great ways in order to continue to educate and communicate with their students as well. But I think, yeah, it's a huge change, but if you keep an open mind and are willing to try new things, see what works, see what doesn't, and really take into account the feedback of the folks that you are working with or the folks that you are, you know, the children you're trying to educate or the families that you're trying to keep informed, you know, that's really important too, in order to build sort of the best possible alternative to in-person communication that's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Maria. Thanks for sharing some of that adapting, the ways you guys are adapting. And I think that's really great, and definitely a great way to use some of those skills, you know, from college in those settings that you're in right now. And for students who are on this, I'm going to have one more question for our alumni, and then I'd love to take some questions from students. So if you have any, please chat those in now, and we'll get to them after we get to this last question. And Maria, we'll start with you. What do you wish you could tell yourself when you were in these students' shoes?
So first and foremost is not to worry so much. I can only imagine, given the current, you know, global situation that we're going through. I know so many of you have a lot of considerations, whether that's family and you know, your own job prospects and housing and just any number of things that are going on. I was very worried, and I didn't have any of that to think about in the same way when I was in your shoes. But I would say the best thing you can do is be gentle with yourself right now. Be patient with your job search, with your transition going out of college. It may not be what you envisioned it, or it may be what you envisioned, you know, 6 months ago. But I think giving yourself the grace to just kind of roll with these changes, to, you know, not treat yourself too harshly or be too hard on yourself for things not meeting previous expectations, is so important for your own mental health first and foremost, but also then for kind of overcoming those challenges. If each one is a major setback to you, then it's that much harder to move on and to look for that next opportunity and to, you know, really try to pivot in a different direction. So I would really, you know, encourage you all, and I wish I had told myself this when I was in your shoes 3 years ago, but again, allowing things to kind of take their time. I understand that there's obviously a lot of different concerns right now. Not everyone has the luxury of being able to just move back home or not seek work for a period of time. But I think not blaming yourself if things aren't going to plan. This is a much, you know, bigger issue, and you're just doing the best that you can, and that's really all that you can do. So yeah, be kind to yourself, give yourself time, and be flexible with your expectations.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks, Maria. And we will move to Macray next for your bit of advice.
Yeah, I think you hit it. Exactly what I was going to say is don't be too hard on yourself. I think the world is full of fits and starts. It's not a straight line to any goal. And I think when you talk to most people, and you'll find this out when you guys are networking, that, you know, people rarely have one job, one career for 30 years, one company, one function. I mean, that's just not how the world works, and it's okay. It's okay to have different interests. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to change. You know, I went in thinking I was going to go to law school, and then I changed, and now I'm in, you know, private wealth, and I think maybe I want to do something corporate finance related. Maybe I'll, you know, when I'm in business school, maybe I'll find something else that I like and change. And I think being okay with change and allowing yourself to say, like, I don't know what future Macray is going to want. So I think that, you know, being okay with that, and not, you know, if you make a mistake, that's okay. You know, say you take a first job and you don't love it. That's okay. Like, you know, that's something that you can change, you can work through. You know, having mentors and having a good support system in place helps you get through all that, but nothing's permanent. So, you know, I would definitely emphasize the don't worry. And, you know, the second is, you know, what I just mentioned is making sure that you invest in a support system. So I would thank myself for, you know, keeping up with my friends. I've got a great group of college friends. We do an annual trip every year. We've got a group message, and it's really great just for a support perspective. You know, it was really hard, you know, in March when all this was going on, the market was crashing, clients were freaking out, you know, sleeping was not as easy. And my buddies would text me every day, like at the end of the market close, like, hey, you doing okay? Like, you hanging in there? Like, you know, we could have a call. And now we have beers every Friday together just to talk about how we're all handling this. One person's in Houston, one person's in South Dakota, one person's in the Chicago suburbs. So it's, you know, making sure you invest in the support system, whether that's family, friends, mentors, and whatnot. So don't worry, and invest in your support system.
That's great, Macray. Thanks for that. And we'll close out this question with Katie.
Yeah, I think just, you know, not to overstate it, but I really do agree with what Macray and Maria have mentioned. For me, the biggest advice that I wish I had learned or told myself or someone else had told me was to deal with my perfectionism now rather than later in life, to check it at the door before I enter any room or space or experience. Let that go and work continuously on letting go of my perfectionism, because, you know, there's something to value in determination and motivation and working hard, absolutely, but expecting perfect every single time, that will only hurt you. I don't think there's any value in that. You know, you can hold yourself accountable for sure when it comes to certain career things and whatever, but first of all, there's no such thing as perfect when it comes to the artistic field anyway. And second of all, you're just going to hurt yourself over and over again if you keep needing to be perfect. And what I mean by perfect is really, it comes down to comparison, I think. Comparing your experience and your achievements and your success to other people. This person is here in their life doing this, and I'm here, therefore I'm not good enough, or I haven't achieved enough, or I haven't done enough. This life for everyone isn't linear. It's up and down, and you go backwards and you go sideways, and that's just how it's supposed to be. And especially when you're an artist, when you're an actor or writer or a producer, like, there's nothing about this that's linear, and that's okay. And leaning into that uncertainty will be one of the better lessons you learn.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks, Katie. And we have a question that's come in through from Shane. So let's, Shane, I'd love for you to turn on your mic and video if you can, and ask your question. Perfect.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to thank Katie, Maria, and Macray for taking the time out to speak to us today. I think this question is more for Macray. So you spoke about how your soft skills, such as like interpersonal communication, is used in your daily life. But what about the hard skills? Yeah. So what are those hard skills that you use? And did you learn them at Northwestern, or did you have to pick them up elsewhere?
Yeah, sure thing. No, that's a great question. And it's really career dependent. So for me, I work in private wealth. So a lot of it is, you know, analyzing economic data. So I got that from my economics degree and, you know, specific classes. I think it's Principles or Foundations of Corporate Finance. So that was an upper level econ course, which really helped prepare me for, you know, what are different types of investments. There's an investment course at Northwestern. So it is a combination of that, but most jobs will train you. And I know we have a phenomenal training program. I actually run our internship program now, so we emphasize a ton of it in our internship program. So I'd say, there are foundation skills that you'll pick up in college along the way if you're going into a career in finance, but a lot of it will be taught because companies have, really phenomenal training programs. So it's completely dependent on, what you do. So for example, I had buddies who went into consulting and, there wasn't really there's no consulting class at Northwestern. But, if you take economics classes or you're an engineer or, even if you were in bio or science or something along that where you're doing, some math and some, building quantitative skills, they'll teach you how to do it. So it's a combination of both, but I wouldn't stress too much that you don't necessarily know how to do a discounted cash flow, at this moment.
Yeah, that's great, Macray. Thanks for that advice. And we've had some questions come through the chat. We'll take one more. And I would definitely encourage folks, if your questions aren't answered, please reach out to these alumni when we share their contact information for further follow-up. But Daniel, I'd love to have you turn on your microphone and camera and ask this question, who I think is for Katie.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, I mean, I forgot what the other guy's name was that just came out, but thank you for doing this. You guys have really given us a lot of information and things that you want. Katie, specifically, I was wondering, do you think you had any significant advantages starting such a young age? And also, for freshmen, do you think, how should we get our foot in the door who really don't have experience in the, or should we not necessarily worry about that later? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah. It's a great question. I think I had a ridiculous advantage starting as young as I did. I would never disagree with that. I had a full-on career by the time I was 18. That's a huge advantage, and working so early allowed me to know a lot of people in the industry early on and have a certain reputation and just kind of people knowing about me from early on. So I came into this definitely with a leg up when it comes to acting specifically. I think writing is, I'm viewed as a separate entity. That is hustling and actually trying to get people to take me more seriously as a writer. But acting, for sure, I was at an advantage. I think emotionally I was at a disadvantage. I was really young when I started, and it wasn't the best thing for my personal development to have so much success as a child, because when that success goes away or when you have to redefine success, it's kind of awful and you don't have the skills to take care of yourself. And so from a personal standpoint, I don't see it as an advantage, but at the end of the day, I'm grateful for it no matter what. And then you said, what do you think is a good way for an artist to get their foot in the door as a freshman? I'm assuming you mean the freshman year of life, just beginning. Okay, good. Yeah, so to get your foot in the door from an acting standpoint, coming from a program like Northwestern, I think getting on Actors Access, casting networks, and backstage, making your profile and submit yourself. Even if you have an agent, great, submit yourself anyway for any and all projects, union and non-union. Submit. Have your headshot, have your resume, have your reel ready to go. And it's the same mentality as cold emailing people from your network. Submit. You never know what's going to stick. Obviously, we can't be in person filming commercials or industrials or TV spots right now, but there are a lot of things being filmed at home that you might be right for, that just from your computer. Look at all the Allstate commercials or the Safer at Home commercials that Subaru is doing. There are lots of opportunities. All those people in those commercials are actors who probably submitted themselves for those campaigns, and it's free to have an account on any of these websites. So be your own advocate. And then down the line, when things go back to normal, signing up for acting classes, joining a comedy troupe, just starting to network in person with these people in your community who are in the same place, because you can make great friends and collaborate on projects, but also you never know who these people are going to be 10 years from now, and you want to be there when they're successful and you're successful too. agents, managers, representation, you know, that's always a harder discussion. And I think that finding representation as an actor is, there's no right way to do it. And unfortunately for the theater community, you're not able to have your showcase, which would have been a really good way to do that. So building your reel, having material that when you are ready and you feel like it's time to submit yourself to agents, you have the material to do that and you have a nice strong resume. And then word of mouth, talking to friends who are represented, asking them what they're doing. Thank you, Macray. Seeing, you know, who you can talk to. I mean, I'm happy to talk about more, but those are the kind of the main points. But the first thing I would do is get on those websites and have your materials ready to go.
Yeah, Katie, this is great. You guys are awesome, and definitely seems like a really great opportunity to reach out to these alumni after the fact. So I will spotlight Imani for to close us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassie. And thank you everyone for these amazing questions, and then for our alumni as well. So thank you all again for coming to the program today. A huge thank you to our alumni for joining in this conversation. I've put my email and Cassie's email in the chat if anyone has any immediate questions about our programs or thoughts they'd like to share. But yeah, let us know if you have any thoughts, and thank you everyone for being here today.